Hello guys, this is Oroth and welcome back to my channel. Yesterday we reached a huge milestone for this channel where we managed to reach 5,000 subscribers. And I'm so grateful for all of your support, and I wanted to celebrate this by releasing something very special. So now I'm going to introduce to you the first episode in my free-to-play series, where I will teach you how to improve your character by going back to my roots and start by talking about damage output. And since I released my first video, there has been a lot of updates in the game, and I've also been able to improve the formula even further. So I believe that this is probably the most important video I have released so far, and I hope that you really will enjoy it. So in this first episode, we're gonna take a look at the damage formula, how damage works. So I urge you to pay very close attention. And in the upcoming episodes, I will give you clear guidelines on exactly how to build your characters. So we will look at every single factor that is important, especially if you are free to play, because I will not only tell you what to look for, I will also tell you the best strategies in which legendary gems you should acquire, in which order you should upgrade them, and I will do the same for reforges, I will do the same for normal gems, and for everything that has an impact on your output. So let us delve into the topic of today's video, and as I said, pay very close attention. It may take a little bit of time, but it's worth it because you will save tons of time if you just adapt to the knowledge I'm trying to share with you here. So thank you once again, and let's get going. First, we're gonna take a look at the damage formula. I've already made a video explaining how the damage formula works, but I have been able to improve this since I made that video. And the damage works like this. We have our base damage, and then on top of that we have several different brackets that will affect the total damage output. So what we're going to do is that we're first going to look at how we calculate our base damage, and then we're going to look at each and one of these brackets, and it's a total of 6 brackets. The first bracket consists of normal damage modifiers, and I will go through what this means. In the second bracket we have legendary gem modifiers, and I will go through what that means. In the third bracket we have buffs and debuffs. In the fourth bracket we have combat rating. In the fifth bracket we have critical hit chance and critical hit damage. And in the final bracket we have attack speed. But before looking at the different brackets, we're going to take a look at the base damage. And what we're going to do is that we're going to calculate our base damage and then multiply it with bracket 1. Then we're going to multiply it with bracket 2. Then with bracket 3, bracket 4, bracket 5 and bracket 6. So in other words, damage output is exponential, and that's why you can gain so much power by looking into the details. And when I'm talking about gaining a lot of power, I'm talking about, for some players you can triple your damage output just by changing the characteristics of your build. And I'm not talking about essences or set combination. I'm talking about which legendary gems you're using, which normal damage modifiers you're using, and which buffs and debuffs you are choosing, and things like this. So let us begin now by looking at how base damage is calculated. The base damage is a damage we can see on our attribute screen. So if I go here to my attribute screen, we can see that I have 23,527 base damage. And now we're going to calculate this number to see what adds up to this. So the first thing that we want to do is to remove all of our legendary gems, and also remove all the gems in our gloves. So now we're at 0 resonance, and now we can see the total item base damage of our items. So what we want to do now is that we want to add all of these damage numbers on our offensive items. So that's the helmet, the shoulder, the main hands, the offhands and the gloves. And when we add all of these numbers together, we will call that value A. And in my case, it adds up to 6,195. The next thing we want to do is to equip our legendary gems again. And now we can see that we have 1710 resonance. This value we call B. The next thing we want to look at is the total number of ranks on the gems socketed in our gloves, because each rank will increase the item base damage of the glove by 3%. And in this case we have 24 ranks on our normal gems in total, and we call this value C. The next value that's interesting is the item base damage of our glove, and we've already seen that it's 725. We call this value D. The next thing we have to do is to add the damage we get from our tourmalines together, and that total value will be called value E. In my case it's 1168. The next thing we're going to look at is the bonuses we get from our Paragon. So if we open Paragon and click on the icon in the bottom left, we can see our total bonus attributes. And here we can see that we receive 7440 damage. This we call value F. We also get a little bit of damage from the Legacy of the Heradrim. And here we can see that I receive 12 damage. We call this value G. The next thing we have to look at is the attribute screen again, and here we can see my strength. In my case it's 8515, and we call this value H. Of course, if you're an intelligence class, you have to look at your intelligence instead. Finally, we have to take a look at the runes that we have equipped in the offensive item slots. So here in my helmet, for example, I have a modifier on the rune that says base attribute of equipped item increased by 6%. So what I have to do is that I have to take 6% times the item base damage of the helmet, which was 725. And then I have to do this for all the offensive items here. So the helmet, the shoulders, the main hands, and the offense. And when I add all of these values together, we will call that value I. And in my case it's 339.6. So now when we have all of these values that we need, we can calculate our base damage to see if it works. So the formula looks like this if you want to try it yourself. We take A and multiply it by 1 plus B divided by 2000 plus C multiplied by D multiplied by 0.03 plus E plus F plus G plus H times 0.3 plus I. And this formula will give you the base damage on your attribute screen. So let's try it now with my numbers. We take 6195, which is A, multiplied by 1 plus 1710 divided by 2000 plus 24 multiplied by 725 multiplied by 0.03 plus 1168 plus 7440 plus 12 plus 8515 multiplied by 0.3 plus I. And this gives us a value of 23,527.825. And it's always rounded down, so it should be exactly 23,527 on my attribute screen. So let's take a look again, and yes, here we can see that the calculation is correct. Now when we know what base damage consists of, we can continue and look at the different brackets. To explain how the brackets works, we're gonna make it easy by looking at our primary attack. And if you remember, our base damage is now 23,527, and this number will affect the amount of base skill damage that you will deal with a specific skill or primary attack. So when I have this base damage on my attribute screen and we look here on my primary attack, we can see that it will shoot an arrow that explodes on impact for 21,720 damage. And this is the base skill damage. But on top of this, we will now start to add a lot of different modifiers. And that's why we have to divide it into different brackets, because these modifiers do not stack on top of each other. There are different categories. So we're going to begin now by looking at bracket number 1. And this one I call normal damage modifiers. So here there are plenty of things that we have to add together to get a final bracket score. So when we have all the modifiers added on top of each other, we can multiply that with this number here, 21,721. So let's begin and see what we have to do. First of all, we have to look at our magical attributes. And that's the extra effects here you can see on your item. And I have to look if I have any of these with primary attack damage. And here on my shoulder, for example, I have 4.5% primary attack damage. If I add up all of these, I will get a bonus of 10.5%. The next thing in this bracket is the set bonus. And at the moment I am wearing 4 pieces of grace, and it does not affect the damage on my primary attack. And the same goes for the Vitus Urge. It does not affect my primary attack damage either. We can see here that I also have 2 pieces of Baron, and it does not affect my primary attack. So here it's 0%. The next thing we're going to look at is the Essence Mastery. And for example here, if I look on this essence here, we can see that the Essence Mastery effect is that it reduces strafe energy consumption by 3.6%. So this, for example, will not affect the primary attack damage. And the same actually goes for all of my essences I have equipped here. So here we can also put 0%. The next thing we're going to look at is the Charm. And here we can see that I have crossbow shot 2% extra damage. But I'm using explosive arrow right now, so this charm will not improve my explosive arrow damage. The next thing we have to look at is the warband bonuses. So first of all, we can see that I'm currently in the attack room, and here it will add 3.5%. And we can also look on my remnants. We can see that I have Typhorus that will add another 6%. I have Color Brutus that will add another 10%. So in total here I will gain 19.5% from the warband bonuses. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the Paragon. And here we can see that I have the old Weaver Paragon, and this will give me 15% extra damage. This also goes into bracket 1. The next thing we have to look at is the Awakened bonuses. So if I have a rank 5 legendary gem or higher, I can awaken an item, and this will give me a bonus effect. So if we look here on my helmet, for example, it gives me an awakening effect that says that center damage is increased by 10%. But this effect will also not affect my primary attack damage. And the same goes for all of my awakening effects here. So here we can put 0%. We can also look at essence effects. For example, there are certain essences that would perhaps say that explosive arrow damage increased by X%. If I would have such an essence, I would add this into bracket 1, but none of these essences will actually affect the damage of my primary attack. Next, we're going to take a look at the Reforges, and I have something here called primary attack damage increased by 4%. This will of course add to the damage of my primary attack, and I have this on every single item here. So then we take 4 multiplied by 8, and we get 32% extra damage to our primary attack. Next, we kind of look at the gem resonance effects. And when you have upgraded your gems, you can start putting other gems inside of them to unlock new damage modifiers. So here, for example, if I were to add, let's say, a rank 10 Everlasting Torment, I would suddenly unlock an effect saying primary attack damage increased by 3%. At the moment, I am not using any gem resonance effects, so therefore I have to put 0 into this value. Remember that if you upgrade your gem resonance effects, it will also increase your resonance a little bit. So then you just have to remake your base damage calculation as we did earlier. But it has very limited effect, so it's not that important. The next thing we have to look at is the rune effects. So, do I have any rune with primary attack damage? And we can see here on my offhand that yes, here I have primary attack damage increased by 4.5%. So this will go into this bracket. And finally, we also have familiars. And if I go to the traits guide here, we can see I have a trait called Bestial Might. times 3, and this will give me a 7.5% bonus to primary attack damage. So this will be added into this bracket. So if I add all of these modifiers together, I have increased the damage of my primary attack by a total of 89%. This gives us a bracket score of 1.89. So if we were to equip all of these modifiers as we have now, with no other type of modifiers from legendary gems, etc., then we would deal 21,721 damage multiplied by 1.89. So now we are done with bracket 1. And of course, if you play a different type of build, now we're making it easy by just looking at the primary attack. But if you are a summoner, for example, then you should add in all values here that belongs to the normal damage modifiers in bracket 1. Then you should of course pick all types of modifiers that affect summon damage. As a matter of fact, primary attack damage will affect your summons, but there are also of course summon damage and other modifiers. So the key to improve this bracket is to look at what type of build am I playing, and then we want to improve these percentages here as much as possible by equipping the correct items and the correct sets. The next bracket we're going to look at is the legendary gem modifiers, bracket 2. And if you look on my gems here, I have some gems that will affect the damage output. So if we look here on my pain clouds, for example, we can see that it will increase the damage dealt by 24% to enemies suffering from a continuous damage effect. So I will add 24% into this bracket. The same for Bloody Reach and the same for Fervent Fang. And then I can add an extra 16% from a rank 10 Berserker's Eye and an extra 8% from a rank 1 Blood-Soaked Jade. This will give us a total damage increase at 96%, and this gives us a bracket score of 1.96. The third bracket is buffs and debuffs. And as of now, I don't have a single buff that will buff my primary attack damage, so it's 0%. And I also have no debuffs that will affect the primary attack damage, so it's also at 0%. So here the bracket score will be 1. And what I have to say here is that when you look at the buffs and the debuffs, the thumb rule is that if you have several buffs applying on you at the same time that will increase your damage, it will only count the highest one. So if someone gives you a buff with 20% increased damage, and then someone else gives you a buff with 30% increased damage, you will only get the 30%. So they do not stack. The same goes for the debuffs, and it will count the highest debuff. So if you are placing an armor break on an enemy, and someone else is also doing so, it will only count the highest debuff. This is the thumb rule, but there are some exceptions to this, so you have to experiment a little bit, but make sure to not use several buffs that do not stack, because then they will have no effect, most of them. The fourth bracket is combat rating. And if we go here to my attribute screen, we can see if I click on combat rating that I currently have 11% extra damage increase from my combat rating. So once you are above the recommended level, you will start to gain a little bit of extra bonus damage, and this can reach up to 11.3% extra. You can't see the 0.3 here, but that's how it works. And this will give me a bracket score of 1.113, 11.3%. The fifth bracket we're going to look at is the critical hit chance and critical hit damage bracket. And first we're going to look at the critical hit chance. So what are the sources? First of all, we have a base value of critical hit chance at 3%. So even if you have not done anything with your character, you will always have 3% critical hit chance. The next thing I have is that if we go here to my familiar page, we can see that I have this MAIM trait times 4. So this gives me 8% critical hit chance. We can also take a look on my magical attributes. On my helmet here, for example, I have 4% critical hit chance. And if I would add all of my items together here, I have in total 11% critical hit chance. I also have Mother's Lament, which is a legendary gem that gives me 32% critical hit chance. And I also have a rank 1 Roiling Consequence that will give me 12% critical hit chance. On top of this, I was also lucky to find a rune here in my offhand, and this will also give me 4% critical hit chance. So if we add all of these numbers together, I have a total of 70% critical hit chance. We also have to take a look at the critical hit damage. And the critical hit damage base value is at 100%. So if you have not been able to increase your critical hit damage at all, you will always deal 100% more when you deal a critical hit. So if a normal hit would deal 10,000 damage, then a critical hit would deal 20,000 damage. But there are a lot of modifiers that can add to this number. And if we look here on my familiar page, we can see that I have a trait that will increase my critical hit damage by 1.5%. I also have some magical attributes on my items. So if I add them all together, I will have a total of 4.5% critical hit damage. I also have some reforges, so we can see here that I have 3% critical hit damage here on my helmet, and this I have on each item. So if we take 3 times 8, that's 24. So then I have to add 24% critical hit damage. If we go here to my attribute page again, we can see that I have 4,847 armor penetration. And if I click here, it says right now that it will give me 58% critical hit damage. And this number will change depending on which difficulty I'm in. So you can always go here to your attribute screen and click on armor penetration to see how much critical hit damage you will get in your current difficulty. Now I'm in the Syranjar zone here, so that's why it shows a little bit wrong. But if I would go out in open world, I can go there and I can see how much critical hit damage I get. And this I have to add in here to this bracket. And I also here in the Warband room, I have a remnant. So let's take a look. I go to manage remnants. And in the attacker room here, I have a remnant called Manifest Carnage. And what it says is that it will increase my critical hit damage by 10% while your critical hit chance is greater than 70%. So right now I'm at 70%. I'm not sure if it starts to count from 70% or from 71%. I'm not sure. But if you're able to reach above this level, then you should also add 10% into this bracket. So this is the total extra I get in terms of critical hit damage. So if we take my base critical hit damage at 100% and we add all of these modifiers, I'm currently at 198%. It's going to be a little bit lower, as I said, from the armor penetration, but this is just to show how the calculations works. Now we also have to figure out which bracket score we will get here for bracket 5. So what we have to do then is that we have to take our critical hit chance and multiply it by our critical hit damage. Because whenever we deal a critical hit, we will deal 298% of the normal damage. Because we will deal the normal damage plus 198%. But this will only happen 70% of the time. So then we have to take 70% and multiply it by 198%. And then we just add plus 1, and then we get our bracket score. So with this current critical hit chance and current critical hit damage I have, I will on average deal 139% more damage per hit. So our bracket score is 2.39. The final bracket has to do with attack speed. And first of all, we have to look at the magical attributes. And we can see here that I have a helmet with attack speed increased by 3%. This is the only one I have with this magical attribute. So I have to add 3% into this bracket. We can also check on the runes here and see if I have any attack speed. And we can see here on my shoulder that this rune will give me 2% attack speed. And the same goes here for the helmet. So then I have to add 4% into this bracket. I also have this gem called Grim Rhythm. And it will give me 24%. So if we add all of these together, we will gain 31% attack speed. And this gives us a bracket score of 1.31. Now, when we've calculated all of the bracket scores, we can finally calculate what damage we will do with the primary attack. And if you remember, we had a base skill damage of 21,721. And now we have to start multiplying this with our bracket scores. And first we can try to figure out what our normal hits will look like. And for this we have to multiply it with the 4 first brackets. So we take 21,721, we multiply it with the bracket score from bracket 1, and then we multiply it with the bracket score from bracket 2, then we multiply it with the bracket score from bracket 3, and finally we multiply it with the bracket score from bracket 4. And this will give us a value of 89,556. So if I were to go to the dummy and start shooting primary attacks, the normal hits would probably land at 89,556 or somewhere around that number at least. Maybe I have missed some little detail, or maybe there is something that's not triggering properly. But we don't only want to know our normal hits, we of course want to know our average damage output. So what will we hit on average every time we use the primary attack? And for this we also need to multiply it again with the bracket score from bracket 5, which is 2.39, which gives us a value of 213,680. So on average, when I hit an enemy, I will hit on average 213,680 damage with the primary attack. We still have the 6th and final bracket, which is attack speed, that we also have to take into account. So just to simplify, imagine that we can deal damage with our primary attack once per second. And now we have established that we on average will hit the target with 213,680 damage on average each hit. If we are then able to increase our attack speed, we will also be able to attack the target more often. So what we have to do now is that we have to multiply this value with the bracket score from bracket 6, which is 1.31. And the new value we will receive is 279,920. So this will be our real damage output. I went to the dummy to test this out. So here you can see a screenshot of when I'm hitting the dummy. I hit it around 88,000 damage with the normal hits. And this is approximately what we have calculated. Maybe I need to stand a little bit further away for the bloody reach to have its full damage bonus at 24%, or maybe there is something that is not triggering. But here we can see that the calculations, they add up, and it's very interesting and fun when we can manage to calculate our damage, of course. What's very important to mention here is that when we look at these bracket scores, there are some scores that are higher and there are some scores that are lower. For example, we don't have a single debuff active or any buff active at the moment. So if I would switch out my familiar and I instead would put in this dragon that I have, so let me switch it. If we look on this familiar, it has lingering wounds that puts a debuff at 36.5% at the target. Then I would actually increase the bracket score of the third bracket by 36%. So instead of a bracket score of 1, I would have a bracket score of 1.36. This would actually mean that the damage output would increase by 36% compared to before. So whenever I'm able to increase the score of the weakest bracket, I'm going to gain a lot of damage output. And what's also very important to mention here is that for different players, the bracket scores look different. So for example, let's say that player 1 has a bracket score of 1.2 in the third bracket and the score of 1.1 in the 6th bracket. Then he has to make a choice. Should I add 5% more buff or should I add 5% more attack speed? In that case, it's always better to add 5% more attack speed because that's his lowest bracket. But if there was another player who had 10% buff, so he would have a bracket score 1.1 in the third bracket, and he would have 20% attack speed, which would give him a bracket score of 1.2 in the 6th bracket. For that player, it would actually make more sense to add 5% in the third bracket. So sometimes when you are trying out the build, you may have one result, while another player is trying out the same build will have a worse result because maybe he should switch an essence to increase his weakest bracket. So when you understand how the damage formula works, you can start making more informed decisions that will improve your damage. Now that we know exactly how the damage formula works, I have tried to simplify things. And thanks to that, I've come up with a great system to evaluate your build. And I call this system build score. And to get your build score, what you want to do is that you want to take your brackets and multiply them with each other. So in this case, for example, I would take bracket 1, which is 1.89, and then I would multiply it with bracket 2, and then with bracket 3, then with bracket 4, then with bracket 5, and then with bracket 6. And that will give me a build score of 12.89. And to figure out my real damage output, I don't have to multiply all of the brackets with the base skill damage or the base damage as we have done so far. I can multiply this build score with the base damage. So in this case, I would multiply the base skill damage on the primary attack that we had from the beginning, 21,721, with 12.89. And I will receive the same result, which is 279,920. So it's a lot easier to grasp how everything works if we work around this concept of the build score. And let's now experiment a little bit. We have already talked about some alterations that we could make. So for example, if I were to increase the buff, the debuff from the dragon, because when we started we had not a single buff or a single debuff, but if we added 36.5% from the lingering wounds, all of a sudden our build score will raise up to 17.59. What more changes can we do? Yeah, we can perhaps change some of our essences so that the awakened bonus effects will affect the primary attack. So let's add 30% into that normal damage modifier. And I'm also gonna get some essence mastery from that increases the damage of my primary attack damage. So maybe that adds an extra 20% into bracket 1. And finally, I could also try to put in 2 pieces of Shalbas, which increases my primary attack damage by 15%. Then I have to add this to bracket 1 as well. And if we are changing our set items, of course we should also then use 4 pieces of V2 to get some extra attack speed. And all of a sudden, just by changing the set pieces and adding a debuff, our build score went up to 29.05. So now our real damage output is instead 631,094. So these were just some simple changes we made, and we more than doubled the damage. And of course there are a lot of other things that we could also do. So this is so powerful, and what we want to do is that we want to increase our build score as high as possible. So the higher your build score is, the better your build is. So this is a concept I find very helpful because it helps me to evaluate how well I have performed in constructing a build. And hopefully this series will help you to improve your build score as high as possible, and you will see amazing results thanks to it. When we delve deeper into this topic, you will understand that resonance is not the way to go, because if we start to switch in a lot of high resonance gems, they do not have these damage modifiers that we need. So when we increase our resonance, we're most often lowering our damage output. And in lots of my videos, I am presenting builds where I go through the details. I'm showing you the essences, I'm showing you the set combinations, I'm showing you the legendary gems, but I'm also showing you the other important numbers. And if you copy a build from one of my guides and you don't look at these details, you will not be as successful. And I'm not talking about reaching the same type of damage output as I have, because of course if you upgrade your legendary gems to higher ranks, it will have more impact. But let me tell you now that if you copy the setups I am using, but you will have half the resonance, and you keep focusing on the details that we've been going through here to increase your brackets, you will double, triple, even quadruple your damage output. And that's why a lot of free-to-play players that has built their characters correctly, they will out-damage high resonance players. So if you're dealing a lot lower damage than someone with high resonance, it's probably not because of your resonance, it's because of your poor performance in these brackets. So I hope that this video is an eye-opener and that you are interested in following the upcoming episodes where we will go through each and every factor that will have an effect on your build. And I will also give you clear recommendations, not only on what to look for, but also how to achieve it. I will show you the most efficient ways on how to upgrade your legendary gems and in which order. I will show you the best tactics to rework your reforges and many more things. So please subscribe to my channel and tell all of your friends, because I believe that this is important for everyone to know, and together we will make your characters stronger than ever before. So that was enough for today, and I really want to thank you for listening in. This was quite a theoretical session, but I think it's important to spend this time because you will save so much time if you just adapt. And before saying goodbye, I would also like to wish you a very nice day and a very nice evening wherever you are. And to all of my clan members in Nyx, I would of course also like to say Voruk Nyx, Sholak Sol. So bye bye!